Hey everybody, I'm Sam Gross with electricbikereport.com, and with me is the iGO Core Edge. This bike is an affordable mountain bike style electric bike that's designed for light off-road use on gravel paths and dirt fire roads and things like that. It's no full-bore electric mountain bike, but if you're looking for something that's not going to break the bank but is still going to get you out in the dirt, this is a really excellent option. But don't just take my word for it. Today we're going to put it through its paces out in the real world to get an idea of how it actually performs, so stick with us. The iGO Core Edge isn't an electric bike that's going to go absolutely anywhere you want it to, but it is an affordable electric bike that's going to be handily capable of going more places than your average affordable e-bike. iGO is a Canadian brand, and they build this bike as a durable trail bike that's going to be most happy on forest trails and gravel paths, and I'd assess it just about the same. It's very much built in the image of an electric mountain bike. It's got a front suspension fork, knobbier tires, and a more aggressive geometry. But its rear hub motor and some of its component choices cut its definition short of a full-fledged e-mountain bike. It's going to be perfectly capable for most off-road applications aside from heavy trail use. And if you're looking for a bike that's going to be trail capable, you might want to look elsewhere. But if you're looking for something that's going to get you outside, not going to break the bank, and is going to be super happy on gravel paths and double track road, this is absolutely a bike to consider. The Core Edge is built around a 500-watt rear hub motor that makes 50 Newton meters of torque. Now that's not the torquiest or most powerful rear hub motor we've ever tested, but it suits this bike really nicely. Built into the frame is a 48 volt 12 amp hour or 576 watt hour frame integrated battery that gives it a really solid battery life, and overall you've just got a nice mountain bike style e-bike. It's got a front suspension fork with 100 millimeters of travel. It's the type of suspension fork that isn't going to stand up super well to repeated, really jarring use, but if you're on double track that has, say, washboard or some rocks on it, it's definitely going to take the edge off. It's got a nice set of flat handlebars, an LCD display, knobby tires from CST, and overall just a really nice component package, especially considering its price point of right around $2,400. The braking is handled by a set of Tektro hydraulic disc brakes with 180 millimeter rotors front and rear. And then finally, last but not least, the drivetrain is from Shimano. It's an Altus 8-speed setup, which is fairly solid for $2,400. Usually around this price point, we see a lot of 7-speed drivetrains, and we even see some non-name brand drivetrains. So it's very nice to see an 8-speed and something from Shimano on this very affordable, yet very capable electric bike. So the iGO Core Edge comes with a set of Tektro hydraulic disc brakes, the 180 millimeter rotors front and rear. Now this is a fairly standard hydraulic disc brake setup for a affordable electric bike, and it works fairly well on this. It's got a nice lever feel, it's nice and reliable, it's a brand that we really trust here at Electric Bike Report. But we want to know how they actually perform in the real world, so we're going to put it through a braking test. We bring the bike up to 20 miles an hour 5 times and slam on the brakes as hard as possible to get an average stopping distance. So let's see how the Core Edge does. So the Core Edge did really nicely in our braking test, coming to a stop on average in 10 feet and 9 inches, which is many feet better than the overall average stopping distance of all of the bikes we've put through our braking test. So really great job from the Core Edge. A couple of notes though on this test. The first is that it was done on pavement, and this is obviously a bike that was designed to be used on dirt and gravel as well, obviously, as pavement. So we can't guarantee you're going to get that good of braking every time you stop. It's really going to depend on what surface you're on and also your kind of knowledge about braking and your comfort with braking that fast. But Overall, a really, really nice result from the Core Edge and its Tektro hydraulic disc brakes. To get an idea of how much battery life in a single charge you can expect out of this 576 watt-hour battery that's integrated into the Core Edge's frame, we put it through two separate range tests, the first in PIS3 and the second in PIS5. And the idea is that that PIS3 range test is going to give us a glimpse of what you can expect of the battery if you were being conservative with how you were riding the bike. And then in PIS5, you get an idea of how far you can go if you were really gunning it. Now in the PIS3 test, we saw a range of 37 miles before the bike finally died. And then in PIS5, we saw 24 miles and change. Now, those are really solid results from a battery that's just kind of middle of the road in size. 576 watt hours isn't remarkably huge, but it's a good size. It's definitely not small, and we got a range out of this bike that we would really expect, especially considering that it's using a relatively efficient 500 watt rear hub motor. Both of those distances are going to be probably longer than your average single day ride. So I don't think you're going to be really stretching this battery for before you can plug it in again and kind of top it off. But it's a solid range, solid performing bike. And the other thing that's nice about this is by not choosing a humongous battery, they're able to keep costs down and they're also to keep weight down. Batteries are very heavy and they're also typically the most expensive component of an e-bike. So nice middle of the road result from a middle of the road sized battery. When it comes to rear hub motors, it's often not the amount of watts it uses or the amount of newton meters of torque it produces that matters most when you're actually riding it. In my experience, more often than not, what really makes a good hub motor great is how quickly it engages and disengages when you start and stop pedaling. This is especially true for e-bikes designed for off-road applications, such as the iGO Core Edge. A bike that has really quick motor engagement and disengagement is one that I will almost always choose over a bike that is more powerful but slower to the gun when you want that power to come on and help you clear a feature. This bike has spectacular motor engagement, which is remarkable considering, one, it's a hub motor, and then two, that hub motor is actuated by a cadence sensor, which aren't usually regarded as the most sensitive type of sensor to tell a motor when to turn on and off. But what iGO has done here is they've used a really intricate and really sensitive version of a cadence sensor. This is called a 32 pulse cadence sensor, which is quite a bit more sensitive than the typical 12 pulse or 12 pole cadence sensors that you see on a lot of affordable e-bikes. And what this has done is it's made this hub motor feel just about very close as responsive and quick engaging as, say, a mid-drive motor or a torque sensing hub motor. It's really good. It's really helpful when you're trying to clear an obstacle or just trying to get the bike up and running. It takes maybe 1/16 of a pedal stroke before the motor kicks on, and as soon as you start coasting, it shuts off and and starts coasting exactly when you want it to. It's a really nice motor. It's 500 watts, which is not the absolute largest. Motors can go up to 750 watts, but I actually think 500 watt rear hub motors are really nice for these mountain bike style e-bikes that are designed to go places that a lot of the more powerful e-bikes aren't gonna go. One, that power is a little bit more usable. It doesn't overpower you when you're trying to go around a corner or get up and over something. Sometimes those more powerful hub motors just are too much. It's like the bike is going to get away from you really quickly. This feels a little bit more controlled and usable. It also doesn't make the most amount of torque, only 50 Newton meters. That's a little bit less than what we typically expect from a motor like this. And we usually, especially in these mountain bike style e-bikes, see smaller wattages and more torque. This doesn't have quite as much torque, but it really doesn't seem to do anything to hamper the bike's performance. It still climbs really well. It's very grunty feeling. You don't feel like you really have to stomp on it to get it to go uphill or accelerate. There's a lot about this thing that I really like that's not generally reflected in its spec sheet and what's on paper about it. I really like this motor. It's a class 2 unit, meaning that its pedal assistance is limited to 20 miles an hour. It's also got a throttle on the left-hand side of the handlebars that also is limited to 20 miles an hour. Overall, it's a really nice feeling motor. iGO ships this bike stocks with 9 levels of pedal assistance, which is crazy. That is a lot of pedal assistance. We toned it down to 5 for our testing. 5 typically is the standard number of pedal assist levels that we see on affordable hub-driven e-bikes. It made it a little less complicated for us to do our testing. And what we found was a pedal assist level breakdown that is very, very usable. When you start with no pedal assist, the bike pedals fairly nicely. It just kind of feels like a heavy mountain bike. And then you add in pedal assist 1 and go up from there, and you get a nice jump in power all the way up to pedal assist level 5, which is full access to the motor's power. Overall, I'm super impressed with the iGO Core Edge's rear hub motor. It's probably the biggest highlight of this bike overall for me. I can't believe how well it engages. It feels really nice. It's something that you're gonna like. The Core Edge's knobby yet standard width tires give it loads of grip off-road while still keeping it nimble. This RST front fork with 100 millimeters of travel is going to be very nice at cutting through road chatter and things like braking bumps, but it's not going to stand up very, very well to repeated aggressive off-road abuse like drops and rock gardens and things like that. And this bike's handling and overall geometry is very neutral and very stable and confidence-inspiring on variable or loose terrain. There's a lot about this bike that does lend itself to off-road use. There are also a handful of other features that do hint that it's not just designed for off-road use. It has an adjustable stem up front, so if you want a little bit more of an aggressive riding position or if you want to sit more upright, you can choose that with the stem. You also have an integrated front light, and there are bosses for racks and fenders, so if you do want something that's maybe just like an aggressive commuter or something that you might think of as an urban assault bike, this bike can do that as well. One thing that's worth noting, especially for those of you who may be looking at this bike and be like, I could definitely take that off-road, is that this thing uses a rear hub motor, which in the e-mountain bike world is really, really not common. And that is for a very important reason: weight distribution. Because that rear hub motor is very far back on the bike, it pulls the bike's overall center of gravity further back. What that's going to do is it's going to change the handling properties, and it's especially going to change how the bike handles when you get the wheels off the ground. Now, you would be very surprised at how often even a novice mountain biker momentarily gets their wheels off the ground. And if you're doing something like that on this bike, it's just going to handle a little bit funky. It's something you can get used to, but it is something to keep in mind the first time you get that rear wheel off the ground. That hub motor in the back also is fairly heavy, and what that does is through technical terrain like rock gardens or where it's very bumpy with square edge rocks where you might bounce the rear tire, it's going to make it want to bounce even harder. It's just a lot of mass that's slamming into something. You may find the rear end to be a little more flat prone on technical terrain, but again, that would be outside of this bike's use case. If you're using it on gravel paths, if you're not really looking to get it in the air, and if you're not looking to charge through a rock garden on it, this thing is going to do just fine on forest paths, gravel roads, rails to trails type paths. It's a very, very nice e-bike. So to get an idea of how well the Core Edge's 500-watt rear hub motor climbs, we put it to the test on our test hill Hellhole. Now, Hellhole is a 12% gradient on average. It's a third of a mile long. It's very steep, it's very long, and it's usually plenty of hill to put one of these e-bikes to the test. Now, a couple of notes on this thing before we actually cut to our Hellhole test footage, and that is that this 500-watt rear hub motor only makes 50 Newton meters of torque, which on paper at least is not all that much. We typically see torque ratings up into the 60, 70, sometimes even 80 Newton meter range, and torque is the most important metric when it comes to climbing hills. So let's see how it all stacks up on our test hill. So this is the throttle only test for the iGO Core Edge. So it's a 500-watt rear hub motor, and it's not the torquiest. So I really don't know how it's going to do on this test, but we're going to find out here very quickly, because we pretty much immediately get on the steepest part of this hill. So far it's doing all right. Hasn't lost a whole ton of speed. Down to 9. Usually my cutoff is about 3 of where I start to have to balance the bike. Down to 7. I don't know, I still think it's a toss-up. We got one more steep section after this, but that was the longest and steepest part of the hill. Starting to regain speed. This little kick is usually where we see bikes fail if they're going to fail. I'm starting to get hope that this thing's going to do just fine. Yeah, I think we're home free. We got one more little steep section. All right, that's it. It's pretty easy going from here to the top. Now onto the PAS5 version of the iGO Core Edge Hill Test. Pretty impressed with how it did on throttle. So I have high hopes for it right now. So far it's just cruising. Not really needing too much help from my legs. Feels surprisingly torquey for a motor that's not rated for that much torque. Cruising our way up. Definitely goes to show you don't need a whopping huge motor to go fast uphill. So despite the Core Edge not having the highest amount of watts or the most amount of Newton meters of torque, it still went up hellhole very, very well. We did it twice up hellhole in 2 different time tests. The first using just the throttle and the second in PAS5 with the help of my legs. And in that throttle only test, it made it to the top of the hill in 1 minute and 38 seconds with an average speed of 11.1 miles an hour. And then add the help of my legs in PAS5 and it made it to the top in 1 minute 8 seconds with an average speed of 16 miles an hour. Now, both of these results are very, very good, and that is for a number of reasons. The first being just the motor size. We see quite a lot of 500 watt rear hub motors, especially those that aren't the torqueiest, at least on paper, really struggle during our throttle only test. This bike did not. It did just fine. It kind of just trucked its way up, not going super fast, but really not showing any sort of signs of slowing down or wanting to give up. And then add the help of my legs in PAS5, and this thing really hauled uphill. 1 minute 8 seconds with an average speed of 16 miles an hour is a considerable result. Definitely going to put it in the upper echelon of all of the e-bikes that we've tested up hellhole on PAS5. So really impressive results. Do not underestimate this 500 watt rear hub motor. It really does a nice job. When I used to work in bike shops, one of my favorite things to do was to help those customers that were coming in and looking for something that was cheap, something that was going to be fun, something that was going to be reliable, and something that was going to let them explore off-road. They didn't know if they wanted to go full bore into mountain biking yet, but they did know that they wanted something that was going to be more capable than your average pavement style bike. For a long time, bikes like that were really reserved to the non-e-bike world, the stuff that was going to be affordable but still not going to break down on you if you took it off-road. Now we're starting to see more bikes like this one, like the iGO Core Edge, that are going to be well spec'd for off-road use. It's not quite a mountain bike, but it's going to be plenty of capability if you're looking to go and explore off-road, if you're looking to explore fire roads and gravel paths, and you've got the addition of a really nicely done but affordable rear hub motor to help you along the way. I'm really excited that bikes like the iGO Core Edge are beginning to come into existence. This again is a relatively new release from iGO, and there's more and more of these popping up on the market today, but this particular bike, the Core Edge, has been one of the best that I have ridden so far in this affordable mountain bike style e-bike category. It's really fun, it's got a solid battery, that motor is just stellar for a hub motor, especially in off-road situations. I like the front fork on it, and I really like that iGO is not pretending that it's a full-bore e-mountain bike. They're not putting out advertising with it going off drops or riding single track trails. They're really showing what this bike is designed to do, and I give them a lot of respect for that. There are many companies out there that are going to point to a bike like this and be like, yeah, go mountain biking with this. I really like that iGO is not trying to sell that image. They just built something that's solid, something that's good, something that's going to last, and something that you can count on to take you out onto an adventure and get you back home safely and without having to burn a huge hole into your wallet or your bank account. If you've enjoyed this review of the iGO Core Edge, be sure to like and subscribe to Electric Bike Report for more reviews and news on the bikes that we cover. And if you want to know more about this bike and the data we collected on it through our testing, be sure to click the link in the description below this video for more detailed written review. For electricbikereport.com, I'm Sam Gross. Thank you so much for watching.